So y'all get a car vlog today. How exciting is that? Hey everyone, Britta Albert here. If this is your first time here, I'm a spiritual life coach. My goal for this channel is to help you overcome the obstacles that are standing in the way of you living your best and most authentic life. Now, normally I don't do these car vlogs, but I'm sitting in my car waiting on my friend and we're going to have lunch, and I'm taking the opportunity to catch you guys up on some of the things that have been going on. You guys know I had surgery and I had COVID, and if you haven't seen that video, I'll go ahead and post it up above. But one of the things that has been coming up a lot lately, and you let me know if this is something that you have been experiencing as well, is there has been a lot of shadow work coming up. And what I mean by shadow work is, if you're not familiar with the shadow is not the worst parts of you. The shadow is the parts of you that you have rejected. So the shadow parts of you actually hold the highest potential for you to be really truly the person that you desire to be, the person that you want to be, but it's everything that you're afraid to be, or shame that others have put on you that you accepted as a child, or shame that you put on yourself based upon societal norms or things that you were raised with, or religion, or whatever, what have you. That is the shadow. And so when we do shadow work, it's not like we're going into these dark places within ourselves, but it's that they come up and they're asking to be healed. So whether you realize it or not, you have experienced shadow work opportunities, and those sometimes come in the form of intrusive thoughts. Now, I don't mean intrusive thoughts as in the ones that come up that you don't really have any control over, and they can be anxiety inducing, they can be really disturbing. That, yes, in its own way is shadow work coming up to be healed, but the ones I'm talking about are like the cringe ones, the memories that come up right before you're about to fall asleep of the shit that you said when you were in middle school, or when you did something and you hurt somebody and you have guilt about that, or you did something embarrassing and nobody remembers it anymore, but you remember. Like those moments of shame, those are the moments that I'm talking about with that specific type of intrusive thought that pops up, because again, it's intrusive because it's just popping up out of nowhere. You're not intending on thinking about it. There wasn't anything that you were thinking about that even the train of thought could have led it to you. It's just something that popped up that you don't want to think about. A lot of times I used to physically shake my head and make those rebury those thoughts. Like I would physically try to get them out of my mind because they were so painful. Even like the cringe ones that were embarrassing, I just didn't want to feel it. I felt it in my heart, I felt it in my throat. It made me feel, I could feel it in my stomach, made me feel like I want to throw up. I had a hard time before being able to even experience or sit with those kind of thoughts. But recently, more and more and more have been coming up to be healed. And I want to take you through an example of one that came up just this week. And I thought it was really powerful because I was able to have a conversation that I've had with myself on many occasions, but it's something that I've instigated. And it's called medicinal dialogue, where you have a conversation with your inner child, or you have a conversation with somebody else, and essentially you just speak your truth. But what happened with this is I used that tool of medicinal dialogue with an intrusive thought that popped up, a shadow healing opportunity that came up that was asking to be seen and healed. So what it was is, it was a memory from high school. And you guys can laugh with me because it's just dumb. It's sad, but it's also dumb. So my sister is 2 years older than me. And when I think she was 19 when she got engaged, or maybe she was 18 and got married at 19. But pretty much she had graduated high school and I was a junior in high school. So I think I was 16 because I was driving. So my friend and we decided to skip class and we went to my house. Well, my sister and her fiance were there and we got busted. But I somehow managed to convince my sister to call into the school, pretend to be my mom, and excuse me for the rest of the day. And that worked and everything was fine. Then we had my soon-to-be brother-in-law call in and pretend to be my friend's dad and excuse her for the rest of the day. Now, Number one, our minds did not think about the fact that the school secretary is probably not stupid, and when you get back-to-back calls excusing students of the same grade is probably a little bit something fishy going on. But there was a bigger factor going on, and that's the fact that my friend is Romanian and her dad's Romanian and has a very thick Romanian accent that the school knows. The school knew him. Even though there was a lot of students in that high school, they were very well aware of who her father was and what he sounded like. And the white American boy who called trying to be her father, who probably didn't sound much more like a high schooler himself, was very obviously not her father. So we had our fun, we enjoyed the day, and I don't even remember what we did. But the next morning I saw her at school and I ran up to give her a hug and she flinched. And her family, and I know this is cultural for them in the church that they were in, and the way that she talked about it, she wasn't the only one. So I have my feelings about it and you have your feelings about it. I'm not necessarily pointing blame, but what happened is her father was an extremely physically abusive person. And that was just the way that it was. And I tried to get her to tell people, and she wouldn't do it because it was the way that her siblings were treated. It's the way that all of her cousins were treated. It's the way that everybody in her church was treated. It was just the norm for her, and she wasn't ready to be that cycle breaker, and that's okay. But when I hugged her at school, she flinched, and then she told me that the school had caught on and called her dad to verify if he really did excuse her for the day. And so he found out that we skipped school and he beat the shit out of her. And so she came to school the next day, and he never hit her in the face or anywhere where you could see a bruise, but she had bruises all over her body, and she got beat up a lot by him for just whatever. And so because of that situation, I had a lot of guilt, and I had been carrying guilt about this for years, and apparently I didn't even realize that I had been carrying guilt about this for years until that thought came up. And it came up as how these kind of memories do, how they just pop in and you're not thinking about it at all. I haven't thought about her in years. Sadly, we've lost touch. She decided to be more a part of her community, and they really separated themselves from, even though she was born in the US, they really separated themselves from what they would call Americans. She wasn't even really allowed to be my friend because I was an American, but that's neither here nor there. So I haven't thought about her for a long time. Sorry, I'm holding my phone and recording this, so bear with me here. I hadn't thought about her in a long time, and that memory popped up, and it was just this feeling of like, ugh, just like gross and shame and guilt and sadness and frustration and anger and all of these emotions simultaneously. And the 16-year-old version of me that was responding to this memory, I realized needed to be forgiven. She needed to forgive herself. And so I told myself, I forgive you. I forgive myself. I forgive myself for having bought into the belief that this was my fault. And when I said that, I felt a lot of resistance about that, like as if the 16-year-old part of me was responding to what I was saying and was disagreeing. You can tell when your body is in disagreement with you. When you say something that you really don't believe is true, you feel it in your gut. You feel your body have a physical sensation of disagreement with the things that you say or think if they're not really what you say or think. So although I told myself, I forgive myself for having bought into the belief that this was my fault, I disagreed with myself because it was me who suggested that we skip school. It was me who got my sister and her fiance to call into the school for us. It was me who thought I was so clever to come up with this stupid idea as a 16-year-old kid. So I did hold myself accountable. Yes, she could have said no, she could have stayed at school, she could have whatever, but I still felt like it was my fault. Now this is where I come in and I speak the truth that I know now at the age of 34 that I did not have at the age of 16. We have a lot more life experience now than we did when we were younger, and we can come in with the eyes of truth, with the eyes of wisdom from these life experiences. For me as a mother, I can laugh at myself now, even though it hurt, and it still kind of hurts to laugh at that part of me. At the same time, it's like, wow, I really didn't know. I didn't have any idea, and I made a lot of dumb decisions thinking I was clever when I was younger, and that's just how it goes, and it's okay. That's part of the process. But I reminded myself, and I asked myself a question. I said, if you would have known back then that she would have been beat for skipping school, would you have done it? Of course, I answered no. And I asked myself, if you would have known that you guys would have gotten caught, would you have done it? And the answer is no. Knowing that it was not something that I intentionally planned. It was not something that I knew the outcome of and decided to do anyway, which would be something completely different, in which case her pain and her suffering would have been part of my intention, right? Regardless of what the consequences actually ended up being, none of that was my intention, and I never would have gone or suggested that we leave the school had I known the outcome. So I forgave myself for having bought into the belief that it was my fault. I forgave myself for having bought into the belief that I had that much control or power over my friend to even be able to manipulate a situation, or, it's not like I guilted her into leaving with me. Truth be told, the first time I had never ever skipped a class before. I was terrified of I would have never skipped a class had I not met her. She was the person who got me to skip class for the very first time. She did other things based upon her own free will. This wasn't something that was me being manipulative or having any kind of intention for her to have pain or suffering. This was us being 16-year-old kids who liked to be a little bit rebellious from time to time, found that to be fun, thought we were clever, and we're both in agreement to having this experience and skipping class and going and just hanging out outside of school. With that forgiveness came freedom, came peace and understanding. And I was able to release myself from this guilt and ownership of this outcome that didn't belong to me. I was not her father. And I wasn't raised the way her father was raised. He wasn't even raised in this country. He was born in Romania. I don't know what he's gone through as a person either. And that's not for me to decide or for me to know or for me to pass judgment on. She was my friend and she didn't want child services to be involved. That was her choice. So I have a change of scenery. I met my friend for lunch. It's been a couple of hours, but I wanted to come back on here and finish that story. So the point of all of that is to just talk about the thoughts that were coming up and the way that I handled that, the way that I spoke to my 16-year-old self, and the way that I was able to speak the truth through the eyes that I have now, through the mind that I have now, the way that I think as a mother, as an adult, to laugh at the parts that were the parts that I thought I was more clever than I was, you know, and I could speak to the parts that were held by shame and the parts that were held hostage by guilt, and I can really understand that it's okay to finally forgive myself for that and to release the storyline, to release myself from this burden that never belonged to me to begin with, release myself from shame, release myself from the cringe, because I deserve that. And no 16-year-old kid should have to carry that with them, let alone into their 30s. So I encourage you that when you have thoughts like that come up, doesn't matter if it was yesterday, if it was a year ago, or if it was 15, 20 years ago or more, go ahead and give yourself permission just to pause and experience that memory through the eyes of that version of you, however old you were, and then speak truth to yourself now. And really be honest with yourself. Again, when I said that I forgave myself for having bought into the belief that it was my fault, I also honored the fact that my body was not in agreement with that. And then I went deeper and I asked myself that question. Had I known what was going to happen, would I have done that? And the truth was no. Because my intent was not malicious. My intent was not wise, but it wasn't malicious. So I hope that this helps you when you have thoughts like this. It helps you heal, helps you process all the stuff that's coming up for you right now. And if you need any help with this, again, I am a life coach. This is what I do. And if you want to go a little bit deeper, if you're a mom and you are interested in my course, The Fearless Life Formula, this is literally what I do. It's shadow work from the feminine energy healing perspective. I know I haven't really gone in depth on that kind of stuff here, because I don't really use that vocabulary. What is feminine energy versus masculine energy? If you guys are interested, I can do a video explaining it. But again, though, if you need help with this kind of stuff, with shadow work, with accepting yourself and loving yourself and forgiving yourself, this is my jam. This is what I do. This is my favorite part of what I do. So down below, there is going to be a link, and it is a link to my calendar. Click on that. If you've never had a call with me, you get a free 30-minute definition session. We really get clear in defining what your next steps are, whatever your goals are, whatever you're wanting to heal or overcome, or whatever that looks like for you. If you are not sure what your next step should be as far as the healing process goes, or even how to navigate through something, that's what that session is for. It's absolutely no charge. It's my gift to you guys. I love you guys so much. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time.